All right, let's dive in. Today, we're looking at the future of European competitiveness, and wow, you weren't kidding about going deep, huh? This is quite the stack of reports.
Well, that's the question everyone's asking.
And oh, absolutely. Can the EU really compete in this new world order? We're talking like serious economic heavy hitters and technology moving at warp speed. Can they keep up?
Yeah, and these reports, they don't sugarcoat it,
Right. They paint a pretty stark picture of the economic headwinds the EU's facing. One number really jumped out at me. If they don't find a way to boost productivity, we're looking at their GDP growth flatlining by 2050.
That's not just a statistic.
No, that's a five-alarm fire. And it's impacting their ability to invest in the future, Things like clean tech, semiconductors, the game changers.
And it's all connected. We're talking about whether the EU can even keep funding its social model, those green goals, even their defense strategy.
This isn't just about economics, is it? This is about their place in the world.
Exactly. And the reports, they point to this perfect storm brewing. Demographics are working against them, shrinking workforce, aging population. And on top of that, they're losing ground in the innovation game big time, especially compared to the US and China.
Which brings us to innovation, or should I say, Europe's struggle to keep pace. Because this global innovation race, it's only getting faster.
It's a tough landscape.
You might think, but doesn't the EU invest heavily in research? And you'd be right, they do. Public R&D spending, it's actually on par with the US.
Right, but there's a catch.
Exactly. It's not just about how much you spend, it's how. And the reports, they highlight this stark difference in approach.
Yeah, the U.S. has agencies like DARPA.
Laser focused on those moonshot projects.
Exactly. Game-changing technologies.
Whereas the EU's efforts seem a bit more scattered, spread thin across so many different fields.
It's like they're trying to be everything to everyone instead of placing those strategic bets.
And it shows. Just look at the numbers. How many truly huge tech giants have emerged from the EU recently compared to the U.S.?
Well, you've got Google, Amazon, the list goes on.
Right, and that's not a coincidence. The U.S. has these vibrant innovation ecosystems, clusters, they're calling them.
These networks of universities, startups, venture capitalists.
All feeding off each other.
That's what births a Google.
Yeah.
That fuels disruptive innovation, and that's what the EU is missing.
And this isn't just some abstract economic theory. This has real implications.
Oh, absolutely.
Because if Europe can't keep pace in this innovation race, they risk becoming totally reliant on others for those critical technologies. I'm talking AI, quantum computing, the building blocks of the future.
Not a good position to be in.
Not at all. And it's not just about coming up with the next big thing either, is it? It's about turning those ideas into market-leading companies. And the reports get really interesting here because it turns out the EU really struggles with that second part.
Yeah, it's a whole other ballgame.
Take the telecom sector, for example. Fragmented markets, chronic underinvestment in next-gen tech.
They're getting left behind.
Left in the dust. You know what really drives it home? The combined market cap of the entire EU telecom sector. It's dwarfed by the value of just the top 5 U.S. tech giants. That's how big the gap is.
It's a tough pill to swallow.
And this underperformance in sectors like telecoms, it brings up this question of patient capital, right? That long-term, high-risk investment you need for truly groundbreaking stuff. And the EU isn't exactly overflowing with it.
It's a real problem.
Because, look, it's not just about bright ideas, right?
No.
It's about having that financial system ready to back them, nurture them, help them grow into something truly transformative. And that's where the EU seems to be falling short. And it's structural too, isn't it? Like, it's not just about risk appetite.
Right.
The EU relies so much on bank financing, which, let's be honest,
Tends to be a bit more cautious.
Yeah. And the U.S., they've got these dynamic capital markets perfect for those high-growth, high-risk ventures.
It makes a huge difference.
Although, to be fair, the EU is trying to address this, right? This whole capital markets union thing they're pushing.
Yeah, aiming to unlock more of that growth capital. It's a work in progress, but at least they recognize the problem.
They have to, especially with these ambitious green goals, right? They are going all in on decarbonization, especially sectors like automotive, energy.
It's just great.
But it also raises the stakes in this competitiveness game.
Yeah.
Because now it's not just about competing, it's about doing it while you're completely transforming everything, your energy systems, industries, your entire economy.
And let's not forget those volatile gas prices.
Right. Talk about a tightrope walk. And it's amazing how something as straightforward as wind energy gets bogged down, The reports mention these wildly different permitting processes across EU nations.
Oh yeah, it's a mess. A real roadblock.
It highlights this fundamental dilemma, right? The EU's regulatory framework, it's designed to protect consumers, the environment.
Absolutely.
But it can also create friction. Makes it harder for their companies to compete with those playing by a different rule book.
It's a tough balancing act.
And here's the real kicker. As the EU is pushing for this clean energy independence,
Yeah.
they're incredibly reliant on other countries for the raw materials to actually make it happen. Kind of ironic, isn't it?
It's a vulnerability for sure.
It all comes back to those critical raw materials.
Yeah.
The essential ingredients for this clean energy revolution. And guess who's holding a lot of the cards? China.
Exactly. I mean, the EU is trying, the Critical Raw Materials Act, trying to diversify supply chains, but it's a wake-up call. Reliance on one source for anything that important is never good.
Nope. Never a good position to be in.
And that brings us to this recurring theme, doesn't it? Fragmentation. We've seen it everywhere. Research, funding, regulations, even their approach to critical industries.
It's like they're not playing as a team.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the reports contrasted this with, for example, China's approach. They've been laser-focused, strategic, unified in their rise as an innovation powerhouse. They get it. To compete at that level, you need scale, coordination.
They've been playing the long game. So it begs the question, can the EU pull this off? Can they hold on to those high standards, their social model, this commitment to sustainability, while also transforming their economy and competing in this crazy new world order? Can they do it all?
It's the big question, isn't it?
It is, and the report suggests there's a growing recognition within the EU that they need to step it up. They're talking about increased coordination, agility, a more unified front. There's this thing called the Competitiveness Coordination Framework. Have you heard of this?
Yeah, it's an attempt to break down those silos, get everyone on the same page. Researchers, policymakers, businesses, everyone.
Yeah.
The goal is to boost collaboration, create a shared vision for European competitiveness.
Which is great, but that's a tall order. The reports are pretty clear. The EU needs a cultural shift, one that embraces risk-taking, prioritizes speed and scale, a real willingness to challenge the status quo.
It's a tall order, for sure.
Because we're not just talking about tweaking some policies here. We're talking mindsets, changing deeply ingrained ways of doing things, moving from a culture of caution to a culture of action. It's a big ask. But that brings us back to you, dear listener, because this stack of reports, this deep dive, this is clearly important to you. So as you delve deeper into these analyses, prepping for that next meeting, that presentation, that key conversation, keep this in mind. The EU is at a crossroads. The decisions they make in the next few years will shape their place in the world for decades to come. What kind of Europe do you want to see emerge in this new world order? Thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, keep learning.